Welcome back. Welcome for the first time. Welcome to Bloor Street and St. Matthew's faith communities gathered together on this Sunday in September. As summer heat gives way to cooler autumn breezes, bright sun to softer light, shadows lengthening, and yes, days shortening just a little bit each day, we move and change with the rhythm and the cycle of the seasons. It's good to be together in our diversity, in our yearning, in our journey. I'm glad you're here. As usual, our worship here combines prayer and poetry, images, music, reflection, story, and more, all part of our spiritual journey together. So as we enter into this sacred space, I invite you to put away the pressures of the world that ask us to perform, to put on masks, to put on brave fronts. Quiet the voices that ask you to be perfect. This is a community of compassion and of welcome. We bring all that we are and all that we can yet be to this safe and holy place. So let us sing out happiness upon the morning. Let us celebrate the earth. Think upon love, that it may grow within us. And as we gather, we bring to this time the awareness that for thousands of years, First Nations peoples have walked on this land that is called Turtle Island. And their relationship with the land is at the center of their lives and their spirituality. This is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, Petun, and Seneca nations, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit, and it is today the home for several indigenous nations, including the Métis and the Inuit. We, as we gather, as we live and work and minister on this land, are committed to live, work, and worship with respect for this land and its peoples.
Jesus Christ said, "I am the light of the world." This light shines for everybody. Join me in a prayer of awareness, of opening as we enter into worship this day. Shifting seasons, passage, first harbingers of change, cloudy mornings, red leaves, chilly nights, sunny days, singing the last songs of summer. In all change, one certainty. God, you were here, you are here, you will be here. Open my heart for your presence. Amen. Jesus is on his way. Outside of Galilee, borderland, non-Jewish territory, people with multicultural identity, people who care about each other. Let's hear whom Jesus encounters and how he will respond. The reading is from Mark chapter 7, verses 24 to 37. Jesus left that place and went into the region of Tyre. He didn't want anyone to know that he had entered a house, but he couldn't hide. In fact, a woman whose young daughter was possessed by an unclean spirit heard about him right away. She came and fell at his feet. The woman was Greek, Syrophoenician by birth. She begged Jesus to throw the demon out of her daughter. He responded, "The children have to be fed first. It isn't right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." But she answered, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." "Good answer," he said. "Go on home. The demon has already left your daughter." When she returned to her house, she found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. After leaving the region of Tyre, Jesus went through Sidon toward the Galilee Sea, through the region of the 10 cities. Some people brought a man who was deaf and could hardly speak, and they begged him to place his hand on the man for healing. Jesus took him away from the crowd by himself and put his fingers in the man's ear. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. Looking into heaven, Jesus sighed deeply and said, "Hephata," which means open up. At once his ears opened, his twisted tongue was released, and he began to speak clearly. Jesus gave the people strict orders not to tell anyone, but the more he tried to silence them, the more eagerly they shared the news. People were overcome with wonder, saying, "He does everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and gives speech to those who can't speak." In this reading, we hear God's voice.
The account in Mark of a few days in the life of Jesus, the ever-present crowd is back. And there's much to capture the imagination in the brief story of a deaf man that follows. But reading it this week, I found myself distracted by two little words at its heart. He sighed, or he sighed deeply. In some translations, he groans. Before he heals a man who needs his help, Jesus looks up to heaven and sighs deeply. Why? Maybe I find it intriguing because we're living at a time when the possibility of a divine sigh really resonates with me. I can relate. I can feel it in my body, from my lungs down to my toes, exhausted, bewildered sighs, impatient, frustrated sighs. Jesus looks up to heaven and he just sighs. A comforting sign of his humanity, I think. But why does he do this? Is it because he is so misunderstood? He comes to teach and to embody what the love of God, the forgiveness of God, what the justice of God and the wholeness of God looks like. And yet many, if not most, of those who encounter Jesus don't get him. They flock to him for magic, for spectacle. They mistake the healing signs for ends in themselves. They adore him as one who heals but shy away when he reveals himself, as one who calls, one who leads, one who transforms. Cures are not the point. Wholeness is the point. Human flourishing in all its fullness is the point. The healing work of Jesus is always so much more layered than it looks. Its roots run deep, and its implications run wide. So I imagine in Jesus' sigh a painful awareness of how the stories of his healings will be peddled and packaged, stripped of nuance and reduced to a formula. The opening up that needs to happen is not only for this man's ears, but also for the people's awareness, opening up their grasp of the radical new experience of God that Jesus embodies, beyond a quick fix for their immediate concerns, to embrace a fullness and a depth of life that reaches even beyond death and yearns to heal the world. But I imagine hearing another deep sigh in today's story, a little earlier in what Alia read, when Jesus, seeking solitude, is drawn into an exchange with a woman in the Syrophoenician lands to the north of Galilee, where Jesus is hidden away from the crowds. Now it is the woman who sighs, as I imagine it. Faced with a Jewish man of God who treats her in her urgent need to find help for her daughter with disdain, comparing her to a dog compared with the elect people of God who are set apart and come first, I imagine her too sighing with awareness of the need for this man to be opened up to a more expansive, inclusive understanding of his own God within himself. You see, the Jesus that I grew up with was perfect. He had to be. The theology that had accumulated around his divinity required it. He was technically human, but his incarnation fell well short of actual humanness. He never messed up. He never disappointed and never had to say he was sorry. He always had reasons for saying and doing the things he did. So if he happened to speak with callousness rather than compassion, if he behaved in ways that were prejudiced or ethnocentric, if he called a hurting, pleading woman a dog, well, surely he had reasons for doing so. The problem is perfect Jesus doesn't exist. The Jesus who appears in the Gospels is not half incarnate. He is fully human as he is fully God, which is to say he struggles, he snaps, he discovers, he grows, he falters, he learns, he fears, and he overcomes. He's real, he's approachable, and he's authentically one of us. The good news is not that we serve a perfect celestial deity. It is that Jesus shows us in real time, in the flesh, what it means to grow as a child of God. He embodies what it looks like to stretch into a deeper, truer, fuller comprehension of God's love. So while Jesus places his fingers in a deaf man's ears and says, "Be opened," Mark also describes a different kind of opening when it is Jesus himself whose eyes and ears and heart need opening, when he is the one who must face his own blind spots, his own prejudice, and allow himself to be opened to the full, glorious, and uncomfortable implications of the gospel. A spoken word piece by a poet, Kaylin Hott, entitled "God Says Yes to Me," captures, I think, some of the spirit we see and hear in the Syrophoenician woman's response to Jesus. The poem spoken word piece begins, I asked God if it was okay to be melodramatic, and she said yes. I asked her if it was okay to be short, and she said sure it is. I asked her if I could wear nail polish or not wear nail polish, and she said, honey, she calls me that sometimes. She said, you can do just exactly what you want to do. Thanks, God, I said. And is it even okay if I don't paragraph my letters? Sweet cakes, God said. Who knows where she picked that up? What I'm telling you is yes, yes, yes. The Syrophoenician woman tells Jesus, guess what, Jesus? God said yes to me. God said yes to me when God tore open the heavens. God said yes to me when God decided to show up in the wilderness rather than in the temple. God said yes to me when you came here instead of spending all your time in Jerusalem. It's okay to be me. So get over yourself, Jesus. It sounds disrespectful, perhaps. It sounds jarring. But let's face it, many of us have felt an awkward discomfort with this scene in Mark 7 because Jesus sounds so not perfect. It's a disturbing picture. It's out of place with Jesus' compassion and mercy. Jesus, the boundary breaker, has blind spots. Beyond rude, his words reinforce ethnic boundaries and degrade a vulnerable woman. A woman who in fact says what we're thinking when we read this, which is this good news? Even dogs under the table get to eat the children's crumbs. The woman does more than get Jesus to change his mind. She rocks his world. She gets Jesus to see God for what and who God truly is. She gets Jesus to open up to what and whom his ministry, his life, is all about. She tells the truth. And when truth gets told, worlds change. Her world changed. Jesus' world changed. The rest of his ministry cannot be the same because of her. And when your world is about to change, even for the good, it takes some doing. It takes time to wrap your head around. Life will never be the same again. You won't be able to go back to the way it was before. So we prefer to remain where we are. It takes a lot less effort to avoid and evade rather than to muster the energy for honesty. Truth takes courage. So we take comfort in and refuge in vagueness. We wait for the right moment, which never comes. Yet for us to have integrity in this day, the kind of faith we nurture and act on needs to speak with honesty and with courage about difficult things that leave us in churches feeling vulnerable. God's realm breaks down barriers. Barriers of friend and stranger, of rich and poor, old and young, able-bodied and disabled. So we struggle to do likewise. As Jesus discovers following God's way challenges us to question our cultural values, our assumptions, our ethnic and religious boundaries, challenges us to be opened up. The Syrophoenician woman reminds Jesus that there is enough good news for everyone. It's what literally happened in the feeding of the crowd of thousands in Mark 6. With the disciples recovering 12 baskets of leftovers, of surplus. This Exchange between Jesus and the Syrophoenician woman is an act of abundance too. There's enough good news to go around, to fill everyone with life and wholeness and healing. Opening up makes us feel vulnerable. It reorients our understanding. It shifts the touchstones that once gave the world coherence and meaning. Opening up throws us into unfamiliar territory where we need to listen and reset our instincts, our assumptions. It's also how the church has mostly grown and changed over the centuries to this day, by being pushed to open up to new understandings of the universe, of planets and stars, of history, evolution, truth. Opened up to fresh awareness of other faith communities, differing ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and different experiences of history. This is what has pushed the church into new ground, pushed us to grow and open. When we've been opened up to people who love differently from others, who are able-bodied differently from some others of us, and so on and so on. We follow in the footsteps of a Jesus who humbles himself long enough to learn what only a vulnerable outsider can teach. And today, churches like Bloor Street and St. Matthew's are being opened up, sometimes painfully, reluctantly, to different measures of success, different measures of effectiveness, different understandings of our priorities, strange partnerships, and a very different place in society that is no longer one of power and privilege. It's strange, and it's freeing. Be opened. Be opened to the truth that God isn't done with us yet. Be open to the destabilizing wisdom of people who are nothing like us. Be open to the voice of God speaking from places we would never expect. Be opened to the widening of this table that we will gather around shortly. Be opened to good news that stretches our capacity to love. Be opened, be changed, be like Jesus. Amen. And now let us bless one another as we go forth. So now we leave this time of worship, and while much of the road ahead is uncertain and the path is changing, we know some things that are solid and true. It is how we love wholeheartedly as God's people that makes a difference in a turbulent world. May God, who comes to us in the things of this world, bless our ears and be in our listening. May Christ, who looks upon us with love, bless our eyes and widen our gaze. May the Spirit, who perceives what is and what may yet be, bless our hearts and our spirits with vision and with hope. Until we meet again, we go in peace. Amen.